Hey, I'm back with another video, and in this one, I want to say that some of I think the realest content, like whether that be like songwriting, comedy, like freeform, extemporaneous talking, like I'm doing some of these videos, the coolest stuff is actually being, and ideas are actually being conceived as they're being enunciated. When it's the realest thing, I think. So some of this, I'm actually discovering some of these things that I'm enunciating as I'm talking, or as I'm creating content. But and creating might not be the right word. It might be discovering content, because creating makes me sound like it's all intentional, but a lot of it's maybe spontaneity and inspiration, as much as in influences and insights that are a part of, but also beyond me, and also borrowed from different sources that I've cited as much as I can. But I want to say that the coolest stuff is actually it's being experienced as it's being fathomed, as it's being experienced and enunciated at once. And that might be your best approach to doing cool stuff, if you're coming from a cool angle. But also there's different ways, and the great Bob Marley has said there's a right and wrong way to do anything. So what I've experienced is that you can actually do a fair amount of discovery in your own vicinity, your own local area, without going anywhere fancy or off the beaten path. Sometimes you see, like, you talk about like lifestyles and stuff like that, but some of the coolest people that have the greatest lifestyles and experiences, you'll notice they're actually just availing themselves of the opportunity in a vicinity. That's the coolest thing. So maybe instead of like taking a fancy trip somewhere, avail yourself of the resources in your area. Instead of going to a fancy school, avail yourself of the resources in your area. So you'll notice that with like people like maybe practicing like pitching a baseball with their family or their kids, and they're like practicing like throwing with each other. How cool is that? Yet how affordable is that? How much? I mean, I'm not saying anything is cheap, but you get your hands on a mitt and a baseball, and you have an afternoon on your health. The health might be the more hard thing to come by, that would engage, that make these different experiences viable. So don't look past health. And it's also not cheap, and it does take effort and resources and foresight to preserve health. But you have your health, or a degree of health, and you can enjoy an environment and avail yourself of the resources that are available. Might be the best way to enjoy or gain anything. But there's still etiquette to things. So I've been availing myself of different places in the city just to pull over and sit down for a moment and do something while I can. And but also there's etiquette to it. So what I do is, sometimes, like when I'm practicing music, I'll practice without an objective, but I'm just practicing until I either feel something cool, or discover something cool, or just get comfortable doing something that comfortable might not be the best word, but until I feel that I've accomplished something somewhere. And then I more so attribute the accomplishment to the vicinity I was at, no less than the position on the earth that my lower rear bifurcated abdomen was resting upon, as the real author of anything that I was doing. And then once there's been something accomplished and objective, then I'll keep it moving. Because like where I'm at now, there's no reason for me not to be here, and I'm not obstructing anything. But yet we do get tiresome. Even maybe to an environment, we can get tiresome. The author Arthur Avalon said that when a great person visits a holy destination, one, there can be great dangers attributed to holy pilgrimages, just because you're on such a high level of frequency and wavelength, and almost blessed, that you may complete the mission or the rest of your work as a person instantly, and you can transition from that standpoint. So there's a little bit of danger, but it's not necessarily a negative danger, but it's still danger in just that things can happen that you didn't plan, and you can go beyond. But from that standpoint, he would say that a person who's versed in mantra, it would be an auspicious occasion and blessing to a holy environment. That's how profound mantra is, according to Arthur Avalon. One verse in mantra is a blessing to a holy destination. And I don't mean to be blasphemous with that, but according to Arthur Avalon and some traditions of India, people who would undergo something enough to be versed in mantra would be a blessing to a place. And mantras can do injury, they can protect and sustain, and they can do blessing, according to Arthur Avalon. So they're not like child's play, and what it would amount to practice that. But I'm discovering etiquette with things. So one etiquette is that we can also get tiresome to an environment, and to ourselves in an environment. So once something has been enjoyed or accomplished, we can keep it moving. I've discovered. But some people would check out a video, And if you speak without, a lot of people want to know your authority and or your sources, howsoever compelling you might be or well reasoned you are to yourself. People want your standing, and some of standing I think has to do with property, but also titles and entitlement, and some experiences are a form of property. But you don't necessarily have to have that. And one thing I appreciated from the works of Osho is that Osho, he has a lot of insight in his discourses, and you would wonder whereby someone came upon this knowledge. And what he enunciates is that what's more so profound than the concepts and the actual data that he's speaking from, or even some of the reasoning and insight, is just the standpoint he's coming from, the feeling he's coming from. So he's like, actually, I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm discovering this as I'm talking about it. But you hear some of his insights, and it's outstanding. So all I meant to say is that some of the greatest, when you hear somebody like musing, like the musings of a madman, the thought process of a person, when they're conveying it as though they're pulling it out of themselves, but it's making sense to themselves and therefore maybe other people, that's a reflection of some of their background, that they can reason those concepts, because there's actually a little bit of forethought in history that would go into allowing a person to enunciate, not the least of which being inculcated into a language that allows us to express ourselves. But all I'm saying is that sometimes it can be more so real when it's being fathomed and reached for as it's being enunciated, such as writing a song in live in person. I've done a little bit of that before and got a tip for that. I actually got a tip for music when I was writing something on a bus. It was more enjoyable to a person that I was actually discovering it as I was, and you could tell that by some of my mistakes and my repetition, is that I was discovering what sounds cool and that feels cool, and a person really liked that. But it's the same with like humor or insight. And so I meant to say is that if you can bear with me, I'm actually discovering some of this content as I'm enunciating it, and what I enunciate helps inform what I'm discovering. But to make that short, is I would appreciate that another thing that's significant in our environment is things that are presented to us without trying to look for them. So sometimes something comes right in front of your face. You can't help but lock eyes on someone. You can't help but notice the cell phone in the pocket of someone who has a beautiful beautiful jeans. I'll just say it like that without being gross. Someone has beautiful jeans and a body that can fit into beautiful jeans, and they have their cell phone in their pocket. You can't help it. You weren't looking for it, but so what I want to say is some of looking for different details in an environment. All the things we say and do and are still within a function, even the things we observe. So as you observe one thing, another thing that you observe can be a function of what you have thought of before. In the strictest scientific terms, that would be RAS, reticular activation system, which someone was impressed when I referenced that word before. And I also want to say that doesn't necessarily constitute any outstanding form of scholarship other than YouTube itself, and that sometimes we actually don't appreciate what is laying around so how much cool stuff you have in your closet in the past, how much cool stuff you have in the collective closet of YouTube and different things that we can avail ourselves of lying around waiting to be discovered. So I'd come across that word around there. But some of the greatest things in life, like a lot of like initiations, they mock or they imitate real life, but these are real things that will happen for a person if you engage in something long enough. In reality, they'll happen. It might be a realer initiation in reality. And part of scholarship and learning is that at a certain point you publicize or you enunciate what you're thinking, and if you can present that compelling and also defend that by therefore making it, because if you publicize anything, you're already defending something. If you can stand on what you're saying, that's a higher degree of learning, and that's also still part of learning that amounts to a higher aspect. So some of these videos, they might just be a natural consequence of engaging with learning a lot, not the least of which YouTube. But that RAS, reticular activation system, is that we appreciate details that are part of different things we've feared or thought about or desired and so forth, is what actually appears in our mind. That's what our actual subconscious mind will scan for and recognize is details, and that's also a function of what we've thought before. So you could say it's a ripple. So what I want to say is that I think sometimes that we're actually the same person living life from a different standpoint and vantage point to curate, so you have different ants in an environment, and those ants, they have different roles to play, but they're yet an ant is the greatest of individuals, yet the greatest of team players, and both at the same time. And that's what's so outstanding about an ant. Even the Holy Bible has commended ants and looked into ants. But we as humans and living beings are also part of that, I think, in that we have different learning to undergo, and that combines to a greater learning and experience. The greater thing is experience that comes from learning. And so YouTube is like that. It's a collective thing. But if you can appreciate that we're all different experiences, sometimes I think when you lock eyes with someone as either a function of what you've thought before or your RAS, that's actually you on another iteration of your own life. And it's not because they're so attractive or interesting, but it's just that either the function of your details you've appreciated in the past, and or your RAS has you lock eyes in a moment where you weren't looking for it, and you're actually looking at yourself directly, and the overlap of your experience, similar experiences and interests and other iterations now